Hello, welcome to the Public Hearing Show. My name is Annette Werner.
And my name is Kathy Fine. We're bringing you the monthly public hearings of the Pittsburgh Public School District in order to create a larger audience for the comments and concerns expressed by stakeholders regarding schools to the school administration and the school board.
That's right, this way you don't have to be at the meeting to hear what's being said. And this month, October, a lot is being said about leveling, a term that's new to me this year. It happens when the district notices that a couple of classes in a grade at a school are smaller than expected, and the district decides to combine the two small classes into a larger class, eliminating the need for a teacher. Unfortunately, and especially when this happens well into the school year, it causes disruption for the students, families, teachers themselves, and this disruption can ripple through other classes in the building and presumably even beyond elsewhere at other schools in the district. So a lot of concerns about that.
There's several parents that brought up other issues, but we're going to let them speak for themselves. So, on to the speakers.
Okay.
I'd like to open up the evening by expressing my love for the city of Pittsburgh and all the different neighborhoods we have here. We chose to stay in the city when we bought our home a few years ago, and we chose to send our children to our assigned public school, Mendeo Elementary School in Squirrel Hill. We've been pleased overall with our children's experience. Most of the time, when I come here to air grievances, it has been on behalf of the greater school community and out of concern for other people's children. Even so, when I speak for others, I am protecting my own, because we do live in neighborhoods and not in our own individual vacuums. I sent a message to the board of directors and superintendent regarding the leveling process that recently took place at Mendeo in the first grade. First grade lost a teacher not even a week after we were told that the classes in grades K-2 would not experience any disruption. There are now 27 children in my son's first grade class. This runs contrary to studies that show how smaller class sizes result in a greater return on the investment of educating children. We were invited to a meeting. Dr. Sims' best response for the inability to stay true to your word was that we should be thankful that kindergarten and second grade were not also leveled. We were told about money issues. Money will be a bigger issue as families leave the district and city over broken promises and double talk. There was discussion of equity. It is not fair or equitable to destabilize children every year at your neighborhood schools in the name of equity. Here's the thing about our neighborhood theater schools. We educate everyone. We accept everyone, no matter what time of year, no matter from where they moved or from where they got kicked out. If they live in the theater pattern for that school, they are welcome to attend. As a natural consequence of the year-round open door policy, our populations fluctuate over the course of the school year. It's a part of having a school that actually serves the neighborhood. Pledging never to condense classes in the middle of the year and finding any way possible to keep classes smaller, especially for our youngest students, is a tangible way to follow up on your most recent PR blitz related to school climate and safety. Giving additional consideration to neighborhood schools in terms of class size, particularly schools like Mendeo, which house regional classrooms as well, is a great way to invest in the neighborhoods. So let's make the most of these beautiful kids. Invest in our children. Be happy you did. Won't you teach mine? Won't you teach mine? Won't you teach my neighbors? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please won't you teach our neighbors?
Good evening. My name is Wendy Bloomberg, and my topic is Kill a Tree. I would like to examine some of the actions of district leadership and then decide who deserves a trip and who deserves a tree. Recently, the first grade class at Mendeo was subjected to level. This is a relatively new term in education, so I looked it up in the dictionary. The definitions I found were to make or become equal, to demolish and flatten something, or to knock somebody down. The class sizes in first grade went from 18 average to 27 children. So much for leveling. The parents at Minadeo were told first grade classes were not going to be changed or leveled. They were tricked into believing that the Pittsburgh Public Schools would actually keep a promise. They blamed declining enrollment at Minadeo, so one wonders what the cause of that decline could be. Here's an idea. As a prospective parent, I went to visit my neighborhood school, Minadeo, last year. The kindergarten classes were 25 and more. I am interested in reading, so I observed the reading instruction. My child is doing well, so I decided to observe the advanced to proficient group. There were 39 children, 39 children crammed into one classroom. I asked around and do some research on my own. This is not the best practice for any K-12 classroom. No one is going to trick me, so I choose to educate my children elsewhere. Now, these same children who were last year's kindergartners are now in the first grade. With 27 children in their class, these children and these parents and their children were tricked again. NEA President Dennis Van Roel said the proven long-term benefits of reducing class sizes, achievement gains, and higher graduation rates should determine priorities. No treats for you.
Leveling. This term, which sounds innocuous, is code for disrupting classrooms over 1 month into the school year in order to try to achieve the maximum class sizes possible because we have no system to accurately predict class sizes before the school year starts. The primary argument in favor of leveling is that it is necessary to optimize class sizes in order to save money, but the administration needs to find other ways to try to achieve optimal class sizes. There are multiple arguments against leveling, including the following. 1. It is disruptive. Students have just adjusted to the new school year and their new teacher, and then are moved to a new class with a new teacher. Some children adjust easily, but many do not. For students with anxiety, autism spectrum disorders, behavior problems, or a history of trauma, loss, or instability in their lives, this disruption can be particularly difficult. There's no way to completely eliminate all disruption in schools. Teachers may go on medical leave, etc., but disruption should not be built into the plan for the year. 2. Student-teacher and parent-teacher relationships are extremely important to children's success in school. The National Association for the Education of Young Children emphasizes that secure, consistent relationships promote children's learning and achievement, as well as social confidence and emotional development. Given that families are essential partners in the education of children, a trusting, responsive, respectful relationship between families and teachers is also vital. Moving teachers around disrupts child-teacher and family-teacher relationships. 3. Class sizes at feeder schools are unpredictable and often fluctuate during the school year. It's crucial to take this into account, or classes could grow to the point of being completely unwieldy later in the year. This is of particular concern when new charter schools open, as students sometimes bounce back to feeder schools during the year. 4. In early grades, many students who will need special education services have not yet been identified and may need more individual attention, so disruption of the student-teacher relationship coupled with larger classes is very problematic. Students who already have behavior plans or IEPs often experience difficulty as it can take a while for a new teacher to understand and implement the plans, especially when they are trying to manage new students in a larger class. 5. Parents and teachers spend the first month and a half of school tense and anxious about the possibility of leveling, not a good way to start the school year. 6. If there's an increase in behavior problems due to the disruption in the larger class sizes, this can impact not only the children in the level classes, but also school culture and teacher morale, and thus the entire school. For the future, there needs to be a better way to predict enrollment before the school year starts. Although enrollment can be unpredictable, there must be computer models that would do a better job than the current system. Another option would be to ask families where they're planning to send their kids to school. This doesn't seem to be happening because every year there are children on class rosters who are already enrolled elsewhere. I'm sure there are other options as well. Central administration almost made a bold and principled decision to avoid any leveling in K-2 this year. I applaud the decision to avoid leveling in kindergarten district-wide, but I urge the administration to do the right thing next year and follow through with its original plan, figure out a way to more accurately sizes and stop taking teachers away once the school year has started.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, my name is Marta Lutini. I have a very short statement. There is a lot of disappointment felt by the first grade parents over the current situation. It does not make sense to many of us why it is Minadel that has to suffer these changes. But it is especially frustrating that we have not even been given an explanation about why. We were told that no changes will be made, and then after 2 months, with no warning, there is a 60% increase in class sizes. So especially among those parents that are involved, that volunteer, that are in school all the time, there has been a lot of faith and trust lost in Minadel and its administration. However, the main concern of many parents who I spoke, it is that the huge increase in class sizes will affect our children, especially those with special education needs like my son. We respect and have confidence in the competence of our first grade teachers, but we believe that will be very difficult for them to handle 27 students. This situation is not fair to either the students or the teacher, but the big loser here will be the kids for sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Tracy Darren. I'm an art psychotherapist at Veteran Affairs, and my little boy is named Aiden, and this is his story. This is called Mental Health, the Story of Stigma. The name of my child's illness made itself fully known when we were in first grade. He had been having challenges in school, culminating in what was described as defiance. But since I wasn't seeing the same type of behavior at home or in the community, I attributed it to him being an only child, not used to sharing. But that winter, during the break, he had been inconsolable, crying, alternating with raging, culminating with him pulled up in a fetal ball, rocking back and forth, sobbing and glad to take him home. He was 6 years old. I went blank, and my denial fled in every direction, and I knew with 100% certainty that he had inherited the gene from my core, my family legacy. Thus began a 4.5-year journey to keep my child in the Pittsburgh Public School mainstream, inclusive classroom, working to achieve a balance of academics with support for very complex mental health diagnosis. It was a journey fraught with stigma, frustration, and social isolation, fear, and blinding rage. It was a journey that ultimately ended in exclusion after the failure of PSE to assist my son's elementary school in providing professionally trained quality support to implement the positive behavioral support plan. As a mental health professional, I'm able to say with 100% confidence that the fault lies with another lack of comprehension by PSE as to how mental health diagnosis impacts learning and behaviors. I have found that individuals within the system want to help, but the stigma of mental health is so profound and pervasive that it is perpetuated by the larger institutions that educate teachers, colleges, and universities. And that teachers are almost hardwired to view mental health as a type of justification for behaviors that would be better left to discipline. The problem with this is that mental health diagnoses are medical conditions, not behavioral ones. With pediatric bipolar, the brain does not produce the correct balance of chemicals, resulting in an inability by the brain of the child to learn how to regulate emotions, often comorbid with executive functioning deficits. No individual with this diagnosis chooses to be bad. No child chooses behavior that results in isolation from peers, feelings of shame, stupidity, and embarrassment. All of them.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you came on. Glad your testimony. Yeah.
Thank you. There's
Thank
resources
you.
on the back.
The flap of butterfly's wings in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas. This was the title of a paper by mathematician Edward Lorenz. What Dr. Lorenz came to understand was that his field had a blind spot. regions where initial conditions can lead to unpredictable results. What does this have to do with us? It is about how small changes can have big impacts on a district. Recently, 4 classrooms were closed in 4 elementary schools. One was at my school, Minadeo, where I attended and where our 2 sons now attend. A first grade classroom was closed. The teacher moved to 3rd grade. The 3rd grade teacher moved to a different school. From the numbers that might have been the end, I'm here to explain a perspective on this that you can't see from the numbers. It's not the first time it's occurred. Last year, a 4th grade classroom closed. By spring, the class sizes were back up and an additional teacher was added. Imagine the effect of those children having to adjust to 3 teachers in 1 year. Between the ever-changing teachers and large class sizes, it's not shocking there have been behavior problems. Many families have left the school, leaving others to wonder if they should get out too. My older son had to switch to a different math session with an entirely new group of children. He attends 3rd grade math as a 2nd grader, an unexpected ripple effect. Just 4 days prior to being notified that classrooms would be closed, we were told that administration had made a decision not to close any K-2 classrooms. But a different decision was made. Like a butterfly flapping its wings, close 4 classrooms. It may be the tipping point for further decline in the district. It is the tipping point for me and others to demand your action. Imagine if that small decision had been a different one. If the district had decided to keep those rooms open. Would a community like ours, who is funding the Pittsburgh Promise, be able to come up with solutions? I have no doubt the answer is yes. We would be the district with solutions. Children would have the opportunity to learn and be valued as individuals, not numbers. We have a blind spot. It seems like we need huge sums of money to solve it, but it isn't that big. A few unafraid administrators, dedicated teachers, and parents can make all the difference. I ask you to act with courage to drive that simple decision. Stop policies like closing classrooms. Then instead of the butterfly flapping, leading to a tornado of destruction for our district, our flapping together will lead to growth and success. Thank you.
I'm here as a concerned parent in regards to the accountability of school officials and bus drivers for the Pittsburgh Public School District. After progressively more serious offenses being reported by the bus driver about my children, Austin and Aaron Gibson, I requested to view the bus surveillance tapes for several incidents that have taken place beginning the first week of September of this year, in which my children were allegedly involved. I did this because if the allegations the bus driver has made against my children are true, they are first out of character for my children. Second, if substantiated by the video evidence, my husband and I would, in conjunction with the school, determine and institute proper measures to correct the behavior. I'm reaching out as a parent with no other recourse except to speak before the board today. I've been in contact with school officials, transportation officials, other parents in the district, Board of Education officials, and I have even sought the advice of attorneys on the matter. After exhausting all resources, unfortunately I have encountered resistance and deception on behalf of 2 of these parties, namely on the part of Mr. Bronze, the bus driver, to the school official, wherein he, the bus driver, indicated there was not even a surveillance device on the bus. This is contrary to school district policy and easily verifiable by officials. Secondly, the school itself is being deceptive to me, indicating they would in fact obtain the videos and interview them regarding the incidents and allegations being made against my children. Further, my children are being bused to a school almost 5 miles from my home, when in fact there is a school less than 2 miles from my home that they can walk to. I cannot expect the zoning issues and feeder school assignment to be addressed here tonight, but the entire bus situation would be moot if in fact my children were to just walk to school. In light of the bus incident reports I have attached to my statement, the board can clearly see a pattern of escalation in regards to the children's behavior. It is imperative that I get to the bottom of this now. I have already begun the process of attempting to transfer my children to Greenwood Elementary. Hopefully that process is successful. I am respectfully requesting intervention by the Board of Education to obtain the bus surveillance to either disprove or substantiate the claims being made against Austin and Aaron. I am so very adamant about the review because before this string of events, there have been no prior instances of misbehavior on the bus by either Austin or Aaron. Also, the fact that there are 2 bus drivers and the morning driver has never had any issues or hadn't filed any bus incident reports in regards to either of my boys speaks for itself. Also attached to the statement of your attention is the
But if you ask a student or graduate of Pittsburgh Public Schools what Christopher Columbus is famous for, they will tell you he was responsible for discovering the Americas and the lost. That is unacceptable. Not only do people accept a false history, students are taught little to nothing about indigenous peoples. What they don't know is often filled in with racist stereotypes that harm Native Americans today. Yet, these stereotypes are condoned in our schools. Every fake headdress worn, every generalization of Native Americans living in teepees perpetuates this problem. Why is there such an imbalance when it comes to what history our schools choose to teach? Why are debunked lies still taught to students? Why is stereotyping of Native Americans acceptable in our schools? I asked the Board of Education to examine the history lessons educators offer to their students and actively seek to correct the misinformation that biased history textbooks give. The majority of history textbooks available today are riddled with inaccuracies and Eurocentrism. If there is a shortage of accurate and complete history textbooks, Pittsburgh Public Schools can take an active role in teaching accurate, engaging, and critical history. Start by abolishing Columbus Day on school calendars and replacing it with Indigenous Peoples Day. This is a wonderful way to engage students in a discussion on Indigenous peoples' cultures and history. Our schools need to celebrate the diversity of our country and to acknowledge the gross crimes committed in the past. And I just want to point out, as an activist, this is something I'm passionate about and concerned with. But I have friends who have children. For instance, my friend with Marshall is here with her son Nicole tonight. She's a Native American woman, and her son is in Pittsburgh Public Schools. And this is important.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
My experience as a social worker has shown me the vital importance of stability in our lives. Many of our kids have a good deal of stability, regular meals, sleep, and consistent adult behavior. Numerous kids do not have these things. They may experience frequent changes in household members, such as moving off the school. They may not be provided adequate clothing or regular meals. They may even experience extreme disruption, witnessing gun violence, facing eviction, homelessness, removal from abusive situations, and any number of tragic disruptive life events. So what are we doing now, and what should we do, knowing that many of our kids lack basic needs and stability in their home lives? We should keep schools as stable as possible. We need to meet as many basic needs at school as possible. In some ways, we do this well. PPS offers breakfast and lunch to all students, no questions asked. This is a move towards meeting basic needs that I can apply as a human service provider. We can contribute to stability by keeping school rules and routines consistent, and consistently follow school-wide behavior plan principles. Most importantly, we can maintain consistent adults in the school building and nurture consistent peer relationships between children. In the self-contained classrooms of the younger grades, this is vitally important. The student-teacher relationship in such a classroom is incredibly important and impacts virtually every aspect of the child learning and even his or her development. Knowing that many of our kids absolutely require school to be stable because home is not, makes it especially heartbreaking when leveling up curves. Carefully fostering student-teacher relationships and student-peer relationships are disrupted and broken when teachers and kids are moved from the year. This is disruptive to the student with a stable home life. To the student with chaos in his or her life, losing another trusted adult can be devastating. This unnecessary and cruel process goes against the idea of caring for the whole child, which is an important and vital district principle. On behalf of my kids' school in Minadeo and all PPS schools, I ask that this be the last year that the teachers are removed after school is in process. I know PPS cannot stop all chaos in the lives of students. In the case of teacher removal due to leveling, PPS adds a destabilizing event to a child's life, and it doesn't need to be this way. The destructive process of leveling can and should be stopped to provide all of our kids with the stability they need. Please eliminate this practice immediately.
I'll be referencing a Post-Gazette article written by Eleanor Shoup from October 15 of this year. About 8 weeks into the school year, 3 first-grade classrooms were reduced to 2 at Pittsburgh Minadeo K-5, leaving children and teachers starting again to know each other. The change was the result of leveling. This time, the only school to lose a its first grade teachers moved to third grade, and the third grade teacher moved to a new school. While historically, leveling had taken place in October. 2 years ago, when the district was making widespread effort to increase class sizes, the leveling was done by mid-September in an effort to minimize disruption. This year, school superintendent Linda Lane said a new administrative team needed more time. Definitely, it has to be completed earlier. I think the sooner the better, she said. Leveling is disruptive, there's no doubt about it. So knowing this, you did it anyway. Before leveling, there were 3 first grade classes of 19, 19, and 16. Now, there are 2 of 27, said Mrs. Wagner, our principal, who said she recalls the classes being leveled in 4 of the last 5 years she's been there. Let's do the math. 19 plus 19 plus 16 is 54. That's first grade. Third grade could be between 20 and 34. That's how many students were disrupted. This adds up to between 74 and 88 students to experience disruption. All this disruption took place because we were short 6 students in first grade to have 3 classes of 20 each. It also disrupted 3 first grade teachers and 1 third grade teacher in one school for 6 students. Why single out Minnedale for such consistent leveling, and what is the effect of it? Well, I'll tell you. Again from Schutt's article. Minnedale has an official enrollment of 388, which is 113 students, or 22.5% lower than last year. The school lost 32 students to the new Propel Charter School in Hazelwood, which attracted students from 17 city schools. Minnedale principal Melissa Wagner said an ESL program was moved from Minnedale to Greenfield, which cost Minnedale an additional 15 students. And some parents moved out of the city or state. Of the students in Minnedale's feeder pattern, 31% choose Minnedale, 50% a non-public or charter school. So here you have it. The result of a bean counter's decision. People who can leave, people who can stay, yet level. It can't be any surprise when you experience leveling 4 of the past 5 years enrollment drops. We deserve a district where promises are kept. Maybe then you'll start keeping families in the district. Minnedale parents complained to a central office administrator, Dr. Allison Hughley, and we were told a week before the leveling there would be no leveling in K2. School Superintendent Linda Lane.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We got it.
Good evening. My name is Mandy Simons. I'm the parent of a first grader at Minnedale Elementary. As you've heard, our first grade classrooms were recently leveled, with the consequence that at the end of last week, my son's class grew by 11 students. On Monday of last week, there were 16 students in his class. On Friday, there were 27. The board and the administration of our school has tried to reassure us by telling us repeatedly that this number is well within the limits on class size set by the district. But this reassurance is empty unless I can be convinced that those limits are determined by sound educational policy. I think that they are not. In fact, I was given clear evidence that this increase in class sizes is going to be detrimental to my son's education. I'm lucky to have a son who is academically advanced and who has received a GAP. I'm also lucky that his teacher is an experienced veteran of the profession who's already impressed me with her abilities, and in particular with her willingness and ability to work with Isaac to challenge him and to build on his particular strengths and interests. Alas, that was before. At the parent-teacher conference last week, I asked my son's teacher what she thinks the impact of the increased class size will be. She was frank with me. It won't be easy, she said, but it'll be okay. I've done it before. She went on, I'll get to everyone. But then she looked at me, and with an apology in her voice, she said, but I'll get to Isaac less. In other words, with 27 students in the class, Isaac and the other advanced students will get less teacher time, less enrichment, and less challenge. Let me be clear, I don't blame my child's teacher. It's clear that when she's forced to choose, her priority has to be to work with those children who are struggling or who are performing below grade level. If I had to make that choice, I'd make the same one. But it's outrageous that she is forced to make that choice, and both outrageous and insulting that the district insists that increased class sizes make no difference teachers, or to students? Of course they do. Let me put this in market terms. I pay my taxes the same as everybody else. So why should my son get less education than the next kid? Why should he be penalized for being an advanced student? In a class of 16 or of 20, he wouldn't be. But in a class of 27, he is. The board is soon to begin the process of renegotiating its agreement with the teachers' union. As a parent, there's one thing that I want from that process. I want a commitment to reduce class sizes, a commitment to stop forcing teachers to decide which of their students to devote their time to. When teachers have time to teach all of their students, then we can really achieve excellence.
Thank you so much.
Valerie Strauss, an education reporter at the Washington Post, wrote, "In the era of big data, it can be easy to forget the importance of the human connection in certain enterprises, including the education of children." A high school in New Hampshire was the subject of a 2011 documentary called Who Cares About Kelsey? The school was in the process of implementing costly positive behavior interventions when student leaders spoke out about the lack of connections their peers had with adults in the building. Students created a chart with the name of every student, hung it in the teacher's lounge, and asked the staff to put a check mark next to the names of students if they had a positive connection. About 1/3 of the students were unconnected with any adults in school. A no-cost solution was put in place for staff to build connections with these students because we know human connections are critical to a student's health, welfare, safety, and academic success. Given the last few terrible weeks in Pittsburgh, I'm sure you'll agree that our children must have a go-to person at school. This idea behind the new Whole Child Whole Community vision. This is the idea. Therefore, every program you vote to implement should strategically and systematically strengthen the health and welfare of our children in our communities instead of merely contributing to big data and test scores. I believe we must end harmful disruptive practices like leveling in October, metal detectors in K through 5, and parole officers in our high schools. These are practices which criminalize our children, and they create barriers to forming positive connections for our students. And I'm also concerned about the $3 million grant awarded by the U.S. Department of Justice Comprehensive School Safety Initiative. Instead of focusing on the needs of our children in our communities, I fear that this is more big money allocated to research studies, data collection, and consultants. I would gladly welcome $3 million to partner with our local experts to expand the successful restorative practices programs already in place in some of our schools, to reach all schools and every student. But as far as I can tell, this is not the case. This $3 million pays for a box restorative justice program, Safer Saner Schools. It pays for a controlled research study where only 1/2 of our students participate for 2 years, and the other half of our students get nothing in the name of research. And like the other grant-funded programs, I suppose Safer Saner Schools will disappear when the grant money runs out. I'm so excited that we're on our way to implementing sustainable community schools in Pittsburgh to provide real solutions to the unique problems of every student in every school and every community. We shouldn't get distracted by grant money that gives the illusion of progress. I'm confident that our dedicated teachers, given time and reasonable class sizes, 30 if not reasonable, can build connections with every student and their families to create better conditions for teaching and learning. I believe every child comes to school wanting to learn. We must nurture them and make sure that every child has a go-to person. Give them the adequate recess time and appropriate.
Thank you so much.
Good evening. I'm going to start by talking about athletic facilities and then branch off fairly quickly to some other topics. Currently, for all of Oakland and the Hill District, there are only middle school swimming pools, small with 4 lanes, not enough for a high school swimming, and particularly in the Hill, a very cramped middle school gymnasium. At the same time, PNC Corporation hazardous materials reports. And my observation is that the more accurate tests were always done, and done before a vote to close, except for Shelley, when the tests showing minimal asbestos plaster were done after closing and not revealed for years after that. More recently, a temporary problem with the gym floor showing was exaggerated reports to the media. Finally, a calculation of costs that will eventually be needed to renovate Peabody, which is being used in place of Shelley and is going without renovation even longer than Shelley, was never provided. This information needs to be stated very clearly and stated for the record. Many misinformed decisions were made, but this board can blow the whistle and say, stop. Are there arrangements that, given what we know now today, will make more sense? For example, a middle school cap on the lines to free up the downtown building for more high school students, and a storage shed for the Tell and IV, because obviously youth prep has not worked out as planned. Very often, as the school district goes, so goes the city, and so it should be possible to enlist the city for support in finding a development alternative for Kingston. But the time to act is now, before it really is too late. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rachel Canning. I work for the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers. I know most of you. Here tonight on behalf of Nina Esposito Vizcaitis, just to thank the board and thank Dr. Lane for including the community school's approach at the big teaching and learning environment presentation of the Education Committee this month. Most folks know that it's long been a passion of Nina's and it's a real priority of our union to bring the community school's approach into our district. I think, most folks in education, especially our members, understand that children have unmet social, physical, and emotional needs that makes it that much harder to learn. And we really see this strategy as one that can it's not a strategy that's coming with big price tags as being bad, but that it really is about aligning with many resources that already exist. So I just want to share just a couple of the key elements of our definition of community schools that we shared with you guys last month. So hopefully you all have and are happy to share more and ever would like to see them. But a couple of the key elements are that a sustainable community school must have a culturally responsive and comprehensive curriculum in every school that means art, physical education, music available to all kids. That there are wraparound services that are aligned with academics and instruction, and most importantly, that they are very, very well coordinated. And another key, and really important, especially after listening to tonight's testimonies, another key component is authentic and meaningful parent and community engagement at every school site. The transformational parent and community engagement that leads to active participation in planning and decision-making, and that builds on existing strengths, recognizing the link between the success of a school and the development of the community as a whole. Parents, students, and community leaders must play leadership roles in policy development and execution in sustainable community schools. So again, we're just excited to be partners in whatever way that we can. We can provide more research and intelligence. I think Dr. Lane is interested in learning more about financing. We're happy to provide that. But as I said, it really shouldn't be looked at as a really expensive new strategy. That's really a strategy that's about aligning services that are already provided by many of our community partners and other government agencies in our school. Thank you.
Welcome back. Kathy, what do you think about the speakers?
Well, I think we had, I thought several of the parents had some excellent points. Molly May brought up the very first speaker, the fact that the district is being penny-wise by saving the salary of the teacher, but then they might lose 5 families, which is a huge loss for this district as we continue to hemorrhage students from the school district.
And it could cause another classroom to have to level and start a slide.
Exactly. This cascade of events that just doesn't end in this one classroom.
Yeah.
Linda Durenberg had an excellent point about walking into her kid's classroom and seeing 39 children, in a reading class. That's just not. It's just not acceptable to be able to provide a child with an excellent education with 39 young kids in a classroom. Shoshana Shear had a very excellent point about the disruption in the middle of the school year. Why is there not a better system to predict how many teachers they're going to need? So part of what we're doing here is to try to provide follow-up. And we're going to talk about
See
this
what
next
happens,
month
because a
and
lot
see
of
what
times people
happens.
will come out and the people feel like they speak and maybe they get a little card thanking them for coming and maybe
Exactly.
there's so many issues and everybody else certainly wonders whatever happens. So
Right.
maybe we can provide some follow-up on that if we're able to find out and even offer a solution. We came up with one possible solution.
Yep.
We learned that at the school being discussed, there's an assistant principal, even though it is a smaller number of students than would normally have an assistant principal. So we were thinking that maybe they can choose as assistant principal somebody who is also teaching one of those classes. So instead of leveling, instead of putting the classes together, keep those classes separate, have somebody teach the class who can also serve as assistant principal during recess, lunch, art, after school.
And there is a precedent for that. We were discussing that there are several administrators that have dual jobs, principals that are serving as assistant superintendents. So this is not something that hasn't
That's
been
right,
done in the
one
district before.
principal who is also, this is something new, being a principal of a high school and an assistant
Right.
superintendent at the same time, and
Right.
somebody else who is going to be the principal of a high school, a middle school, and be an assistant superintendent. So you would think, especially in a school that might not even have an assistant principal, that somebody might be able to handle some teaching duties, and when they're not in front of the classroom, perform some of the assistant
Exactly.
principal duties.
And this
So-
is the kind of dialogue that we want to promote so that we can come up with real solutions for parents' concerns. And you know, leveling is not the only concern in this district.
Of course, there's many other, this is something new, this is kind of
Mhm.
an issue of the month, and I think a lot of times people tend to come out when there's something new. They feel like they can have an impact, there's a focus right then.
Mhm.
There's some things that are just ongoing achievement maybe, or of course enrollment. Maybe there should be a little bit more of a focus this month because of a big drop in the kindergarten.
What did you say it was,
enrollment.
11.5%?
11.5% drop
Mhm.
and I did a little bit of research on the number of births during the relevant years and found that the birth rate dropped by maybe 1.3%,
Mhm.
but there was an 11.5% drop
Right.
in students entering kindergarten. So
Right.
it's interesting, that's not the kind of thing you're probably not going to have a whole bunch of parents come out and say, well, you know, I'm not putting my child in kindergarten, they'll just go.
Right.
And you're not going to have somebody come in and say, well, all those other people didn't. You know, the district knows that you know they're not putting their children in kindergarten, and I
Right.
guess people like to think that hopefully it's being addressed somehow. So I guess I just want to say that just because nobody is discussing enrollment, for example,
Or
doesn't
safety,
mean-
or-
or
Mhm,
safety,
mhm.
those are very big concerns. But it's moments like this when there's a focus, when there's something new. Maybe people didn't even realize. Some people may not even know there is a public hearing,
Right.
and who their board representative is. So this brings them out, and it's an opportunity to really kind of address those concerns before they just become kind of part of the underlying static. Well, you know that
Right.
we have to get to sometime.
So, I mean, one of the things that we're hoping to accomplish with this show is to provide a bigger forum, to make sure that these issues don't go to the school board public hearing room to die, and that they're, and hopefully to promote and encourage some follow-up and constructive solutions to bring issues up that have not been brought up at public hearings. But we know, as we've been following this district very closely for years now, that there are bigger issues that need to be addressed. And hopefully that's going to happen over the months while we're doing this show.
And have some true parent engagement,
Ex-
community engagement, what we've been
Number
working
one.
for years.
Exactly.
Yes.
So join us next month for the next public hearing, and we'll look forward to seeing you then.
Okay, bye-bye.